Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon for me, this morning for other people around the world, and I think some of us are joining us from Australia. So good evening or good night, more likely. So yeah, appreciate your time in spending the hour with us on this Google Workspace community hangout. And so with that, I'd like to hand over to DMA. Where she will be talking about the Google Workspace, project management, AI, and all those kind of things. And as I mentioned in the pre-talk, this is probably one of the most highly requested sessions. So yeah, to this particular session, and I imagine there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of interaction. So with that, just hand over to DMA. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul and Molly, everyone. It's a delight to be here. I am a longtime strategic consultant and a veteran entertainment executive. And in the midst of all of that, for 20 years, I've also been a tech entrepreneur. And as part of that work, I am regularly combining really strong principles and practices of project management with technology that lets you implement that. So for today's session, I do want to make it quite applicable to Google Workspace admins because you live eternally in a project management mode. And what I mean by that is whether you're in-house at an organization or you're a freelancer and you're managing multiple clients, there's a whole series of executions you're responsible for initiating, shepherding, and of course, delivering ideally to a successful conclusion. And so in my strategic consulting work, one of the first things that I do when I come into an organization, whether it's a Fortune 500 or a little local, mom and pop nonprofit, is I cancel all of the meetings and I take away all the technology. Because what I want to see is how do you organically manage information, stakeholders, deadlines, etc. Then we bring the technology and the meetings, the infrastructure of project management back into play that really supports how you and your team and your stakeholders work. And so this is going to be no different, except for in the instance of people who work in technology, we have what I call the tab tax working against us. So no matter how many tools you're using right now to manage all of your projects internally or for external clients, I want you to take a moment in the chat and I want you to add up 3 numbers. 1, how many tabs are currently open on every browser and okay, we're not going to do that. But you know what I mean. What we organically tend to do in project management is manage one by tab. If the tab is open, it means something. It's got a deadline. Oh, Jonathan, you're killing it. It's got to be addressed, and then we watch those tabs dance, dance, dance. Then we open another browser and the tabs dance, dance, dance. And heaven forbid your browser crashes, your computer crashes, because your entire history of important things has to be reconstructed, if you're fortunate, from your history or activities tab. Then you have management by email, or internationally for my clients, management by WhatsApp or Slack, where everything is kind of in the junk drawer of the sky, in the junk drawer of the sky. And that's where you're going to go and try and find, where was that file, or when was this thing due, or when did we talk about, or who said they were going to do this? So it's a highly scattered and fragmented approach. So on this conversation, I'm going to open with the same conversation I have with anyone I'm working with. Number 1, we're going to talk about the 5 principles of project management. This is how I approach project management. You will see lists of all sorts. 5 is manageable, 5 is chewable. I stick with 5. Then we're going to do the 3 practices of successful project management. And that's what we're going to use as the framework to examine a series of Google Workspace tools that integrate Gemini to see how we can implement those best practices and principles using those tools. And this is how you can get a handle on, for yourself and more importantly for your clients as they're struggling with how do we want to implement Gemini into our workflows, or even third-party non-Google Workspace solutions in AI. So with that, we're going to begin. First, let's start with the 5 core principles of project management. And if it's all right, I'm not a big fan of presentations. Most of this is going to be live demo, but you are going to get a copy of all of this afterwards. So feel free to take notes, but you're going to get a detailed document after so that you can just engage. So the first principle of project management is establishing a measurable outcome, beginning at the end. And in order to begin at the end, remember you want to set up a baseline measurement. Where are we starting from? If we're trying to increase consumption of cloud storage, then we have to understand where we're starting at the beginning of this and how are we pushing our customers to increasingly use Google Cloud. So in order for me to establish a measurable outcome, I do have to first measure where I'm starting from. The second one, and this is the biggest one, you have to meaningfully engage all of the stakeholders. One of the things that will compromise almost any project is the project lead coming up with the plan and then top down distributing that to everybody that is responsible for informing, executing, and experiencing the consequences of the execution of the plan. So for you, if you are doing project management, you're always looking for tools and processes that let you identify the stakeholders, communicate with the stakeholders, and keep the stakeholders engaged. The stakeholder ecosystem, at minimum, is going to include whoever is paying for the project. That is really, really important. Your funder, or if it's your organization, the company itself, the financial decision makers, whoever is the recipient of the executed project, that's going to be your audience, your service population, your client base, depending on the type of work you're doing. And most importantly, the team who has to execute the project is a critical stakeholder. And they're often left out of the planning conversations and they're just handed a plan. But your team knows better than anybody, and that includes if you are the team of one, but your team knows better than anybody what are some of the sentiments around this work, who has often been impacted by this work, what unexpected costs and consequences of the work would be. So we're going to establish meaningful outcomes as part of project management, and we're going to identify and engage all stakeholders. Next is we're going to stay incredibly flexible. You're going to evaluate and adapt what you're doing throughout the execution of the project. You're going to evaluate and adapt what you're doing throughout the execution of a project. So by the time I've been hired, I'm called a cleaner often in strategic consulting. By the time I've been hired, things have gone terribly wrong. And the thing that will always be identified in the audit before you start to try and do redress is someone had an idea for a plan and the plan became the thing. Just raise your hand or indicate if you know what I mean when I say the plan became the thing. The execution of this person's plan became the definition of a successful outcome, as opposed to those measured, meaningful metrics that we talked about in the beginning about how the recipient, the audience experience was going to change. So for you in project management, you need to find a place where constant conversation, visualization, and evaluation of progress is going to let you move and adapt nimbly to what you're discovering along the way. And finally, you want to deliver measurable value. The most important piece, and this comes back to the plan becoming the thing, is you've set up what a measurable outcome looks like that delights all the stakeholders. At the end, you have to deliver something that is measurably valuable. And that is where you want to come back to that bookend and say, where did we say we were trying to go with this project? Did we get there? Did we end up pivoting because of knowledge that we acquired along the way and we were adapting? But at the end, I do have to offer a measure of the outcome, and I have to deliver that in some type of a form to my users. Those are the 5 principles of project management. Any thoughts or questions before we move on? And I should be good about checking chat, but Paul, also, I know you're going to keep me Someone needs a new tab to tabulate their tabs. Oh my
I was just going to ask DMA, did you mean to be sharing slides or anything while you're talking? I don't know.
No, I was saying we're going to do most of this in a live demo. You're going to hear this over and over. I'm not a huge fan of slide presentations. I did prepare one with Notebook LM Plus, and it was so frightening that I decided not to share it, but I'm happy to share it at the end. It's still a work in progress. We love Notebook LM Plus.
I was more just making sure I didn't have a technical problem and I was not seeing the slides somehow. So.
Yes. So I will not be sharing slides, but you will be getting an output of this at the end. So feel free just to enjoy the conversation. Know that you're going to have a detailed document that you'll get at the end of the session. And of course, I'm happy if it's helpful to also respond to any questions and notes. Those are the 5 principles. And when you hear it, it helps you separate project management from task management. So when you're executing the project, there's 3 I have them from being in presentations where the slides have become the thing. So even when I do slides, I'll often put a single word on a slide because sometimes it's calming and soothing for folks to see. All right, the 3 core practices of successful project management. Number 1, brain dump. That's a highly technical term, but here's what it means. Everything has to constantly get out of everybody's head. Successful project management means 0 project management happening in the head of a stakeholder. If you are working with a client, or perhaps you are the person who feels that keeping everything in your head is the best way to manage it, I know what's happening. It is the #1 disruptor of project execution, because it means if you or this person who is headspace oriented forgets to do something, goes on vacation, has an accident, any of the many things that could happen, the project will stop moving forward. So the first rule, and if you do nothing else, brain dump. No one gets to keep any element of the project in their head. The second rule is centralize. Centralize. Projects that are successful have a single source of truth. So to some degree, when you're looking at people building out massive threads to manage projects, what is working there is that there is a single source of truth. What is increasingly difficult is to get the rest of the principles in action because they're not task management platforms. So I'm going to brain dump. I'm going to centralize to a single source of truth. And third, and this is big, and this is tech. Every single day, I have to review and prioritize the plan daily, not weekly, not monthly, not quarterly. I need to be in constant fluid engagement with the plan and get that top thing for my stakeholders out each day. So we have the 5 principles and the 5 practices of successful project management. I'm going to reference these in each of the tools that we take a look at. So you will be very tired of the 5 and the 3 in a second. But first, before we go into demos, do we have any thoughts or questions about the principles or practices? All right. I'm going to start with our first platform. We're going to start with the holy grail of project management tools at every company I have ever worked with, and that is Google Docs. I'm going to share my screen. So we're going to take a look at Google Docs in Gemini. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to create a blank Google Doc. And then I've got my chat prompt over here. I'm just going to grab really quickly. We're going to use the same prompt in every one of the tools. I'm starting with Google Docs, and I'm going to switch to my business plan, everyone, because the business plan has way more power in Docs and Drive. So do you see this lovely help me write here, just nice and organically. It's saying, help me write. I'm going to put my chat prompt in. And let me just share what I'm putting into the prompt. Prompt engineering is its own separate, delightful presentation, because you can definitely over-inform, but you could absolutely under-inform. So I like to do a who, what, where, when, and how. So I'm explaining that I'm a Google Workspace admin. And I've come up with a project that's actually very meaningful for all of us on this call. My company or my client, if you are a consultant, has been tasked with creating an AI FAQ set or library so team members will know the policy and tools, reducing AI-related support emails by 30% over the next quarter. So I got my meaningful measure in there. Create a project management solution for us to execute from that's compliant with our AI policy, act as a technical project manager, and output a definitive project charter, scopes, timeline, and draft FAQs. All right, and so that is the fastest way. I'm going to discard this to go through using Gemini to set up a project. It's going to do it for you. I'm going to go ahead and use the side panel though, because I do want to use a smart chip. I'm just going to use and then I'm going to really hope, you know, smart chips don't always surface everything we need. And if it doesn't, I'm going to go ahead and just use, I'm just going to use the link to the document. If you are trying to use the @ symbol and it's not pulling up your document, you can still just put your prompt in here and add a link to the document, and it will still be able to read that for you. The first principle is put in a fairly robust prompt and into any of these solutions, and it's going to give you this nice set of assets. So I've got my project timeline and, you know, some sample FAQs. So when we talk about the principles of project management, the first thing that I see here is that I put the outcome into the prompt, and here's my outcome. So I've got an established outcome. And then as I'm coming through and looking at my timeline, and I'm ready to start adding tasks or responsibilities or assignments, I could manage that through the FAQs, or I can obviously come right back over into the gems, into a Gemini, and just say, you know, create a stakeholder task list for week 1. So I can continue contextually to build this out. And that's going to allow me to be very fluid, because it can also reference what it's creating. So I'm going to insert that into here, and then the way that any of the Google Workspace files works, I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to insert a column, and then I'm just going to say assigned to. And then I can use chips, hit that @ sign. I can assign it to me. I'm going to assign it to you, Stefan, my wonderful co-founder here on the call. And that is giving you a fairly basic project management experience. So another thing that we might want to do is create a custom gem to help us manage this a little more simply. So I have an AI policy that I wanted to review. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop the policy into the document as a section. And we're using, you know, standard outline so that it's a little easier to navigate. So let's say in the entire document, I've now got my objectives, you know, my charter here. And then I'm going to have my tasks. And then I'm going to have my actual adding a heading here, and then I'm going to have my actual policy. So I'm going to create a gem. This is a really lovely, lovely use of Gemini in Google Docs or Sheets. So I'm going to go to gems, and those are our little custom chatbots. And I want to create a gem that's going to be an evaluator. So this is an example of a gem. So I came in to gem, there we go, into gems and said, I want to create a reviewer persona for our company's FAQs, right? And so when you're thinking about project management, it's not just the tool, but what can AI do to replace or supplement work that I may not have someone for? So I'm going to say my AI FAQs evaluator. It's just as simple as naming it. And then this assists our team in policy review as we draft the new AI FAQs, and then instructions. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to grab gems. There we go. So we're going to act as a reviewer persona trained on our AI policy to review FAQs as we go. And then I'm going to save that. All right, fantastic. So I can chat inside of here, which would be lovely. But what I really want to do is now I can come over to Gemini in this Google Doc. And I'm going to come up here and take a look. And let me refresh so it will see the new gem. Or if not, we can just use the old gem. So once you've created those gems, it's giving you the opportunity, switching, to create personas. And I would even say consider creating a persona for each of your stakeholders, so that even when you've got folks, they may not always be available. That could be a great exercise to work with your stakeholders to do. So here's my FAQs evaluator, and just say, you know, review our first, you know, FAQs for policy compliance. So this is where you could work with your legal team, your IT securities and compliance division. Oh, goodness. Right, though. So now I have a really useful additional piece of this that I might even want to add as a stage throughout project management, which is, you know, who and when was this reviewed and what were the results of the review. So as ever, I'm going to insert. So you're able to see that using your Gemini tools in Docs lets you create that project plan, lets you add people. You already know how to do comments, so your stakeholders can engage. And of course, you can create custom gems to be even more thorough as you're doing the work. And you can leverage those gems right from Google Docs. So that is the upside. I can brain dump to my heart's content. I can certainly centralize everything in this one document. And of course, I could come in each day, go to my tasks and prioritize. That does require, you know, copying and pasting or dragging, you know, rows and dropping them. It's not delightful, but it works. So this is level 1, Google Docs. So let's go straight into Google Sheets. And Paul, since I'm sharing my screen, if there are any questions or hand raised, please go ahead and let me know. But I want to move forward now.
Yes, sorry, DMA, we've just got a question from Chuck.
Yes.
just about the gems themselves. So if a gem is in a Google Doc and you've shared the Google Doc with a client, does the client also have access to that gem?
No, they would want to share the gem.
You have to share the gem as well as the Google Doc.
Yes, because the gem is going to be available throughout their ecosystem, which is what's so lovely about them. And as you can see, if you've ever created a custom, chatbot in any of the other AI systems, it's incredibly easy to set these up. And then this was a huge push for Gemini to say these gems are going to be accessible everywhere. Any other thoughts or questions?
Nope, they're all good now, I think. Anybody else got a question?
All right, let's go on to Sheets. I'm a huge Google Sheets fan, huge. App scripts changed all of our lives. App scripts changed our lives. I'm going to stay on Gemini. Okay, so remember, we want to establish that measurable outcome, engage the stakeholders, evaluate constantly. So we're going to create a Google Sheet now. And as you can imagine, much of this is going to be similar. Everything I could do in that doc, I can do in the sheet. So I'm just going to quickly paste the same prompt into my sheet. Fantastic. And then we're going to show you kind of that next level that you can do. Let me grab the prompt again. The next level that you can do using Sheets. So I would say that while Docs is almost always the item of choice for the clients that I work with, it just gets very long and very messy very quickly. So we're going to try again to get, there we go. This is such a nice next level up. So we're going to grab that. And then we're going to press go. Standing by. So in this instance, Gemini came back with something a little more basic. Same command, a little more basic. I'm going to go ahead and insert it. And then I'll show you a prior result from that prompt. So what you're already seeing is you're getting a table here. So it's going to be a bit easier to manage. I'm going to go to the original result that I got so you can see, depending on, it's the same prompt. This is just a different response. This is an extraordinary, it's something incredible to have in 10 seconds. So I wanted to show you what this looks like, because if you don't get this, you can always go back in and re-engineer that prompt and say, I want you to include more columns, give me that owner, give me that due date, etc. So already by placing it into this space, it is making it possible for me to add stakeholders. So I could do the same thing. I can add a column here. And then, just put an assignee. And then, we love smart chips. I can put names in, I can add documents, I can add calendar appointments, etc. So this is instantly a more manageable portion for that piece of best practices, which is prioritizing on a daily basis, because I can come in here. It's even given me these wonderful gradients where I can kind of indicate manually what the status of this is. And it's also going to let me come in potentially and group these, based on my project phase, etc. So tables in Sheets is just a wonderful addition to the suite. And this was in instance. What you can do with a sheet that you can't do with a doc is better visualization. So I could also come in to this document and I'm going to give it a command. And we don't have that much data, so it's not going to be so amazing. But I can say, create a dashboard. So if you've got customers, as I often do, that really thrive on visualizations, how many applications have come in? How many of these are completed? How many, what you've been building either in Looker Studio or, you know, honestly, sometimes just manually because you highlight the data, it's going to suggest visuals for you. You can truly come to Gemini and it will create that for you instantly. This, for me, is just such a terrific opportunity to get to quick visuals. And in this instance, unfortunately, you know, it's terrible for actual document management. It's telling me I am offline. Paul, are you still seeing me?
Yes,
We still hear
yeah,
you. I don't know if
yeah,
you're seeing
Oh,
that.
fantastic. Okay, thank you. I just saw that. So is this delightful to look at? Well, you know, no. But if you worked with your prompts, could it get you somewhere? You know, yes. So I'm going to, there we go. I'm going to drop it in again. The internet took another tiny hit here, so there we go. Let's try again and see if the internet holds out. So create a simple chart. And for this, let's just go ahead and just give you a sample. Oops. One of the things I love to use for demos is that you can also do dummy data really quickly. You can do dummy data very quickly using Gemini. So it's, you know, spin up a draft table for me, spin up, you know, etc. So that I do also love. But I think that the ability to immediately visualize is the biggest time saver for me of using Gemini if I'm going to use it in Sheets, especially when you have a massive pile of data that you're trying to get through. So in your instance, you might have a ticketing system that you love. And when I choose insert, you have the option to just drop it in here or put it into another field. So it's just a nice, quick way to get yourself visualized. And that is how I could potentially manage projects in Sheets. But as you're seeing between these examples, all of those principles of project management are going to be great. I could definitely brain dump in here. I love the idea of having just a tab where people can dump ideas that we can sort through. And I absolutely can get all of my stakeholders engaged and contacted, etc. One of the pieces that I can do using those smart chips is I'm going to be able to get my files and my assets attached in a meaningful way because smart chips completely change the game in Sheets and in Docs. But when it comes to centralizing everything, this isn't the greatest place to communicate. I can't easily centralize all of my thoughts because we don't want to put a bunch of things, a whole block of text in a single cell. It's just not physically attractive. But if it's tabular information from building out my FAQs to doing my task plan and then using my wonderful smart chips and comments to communicate, this really works certainly better than a Google Doc. And so that's how quickly you would be able to use Gemini to put the plan together and then to manage each of the aspects so that you're doing a duly executed project management. All right, so those are the two document-focused uses of Gemini. I'm going to stop sharing for a second in case there are questions. Okay, so now we're going to switch to the non-document focus. Now we want to use the application, the chat-focused tools and see how that's going to help me with project management. So I'm going to go back, and we're actually going to start in an unexpected place, because one might think this would be the best possible use case, but it's not. We're actually going to go next to Gemini, the Gemini app itself, and just making sure everyone is seeing my screen. So as ever, we want to establish that measurable outcome. We want to engage the stakeholders. I'm just going to grab, there we go. I'm going to grab that chat one more time. And now we're going to go to the Gemini app itself. So the Gemini app is so incredibly powerful, particularly for anyone working inside of Google Workspace, because as long as you've given it permissions, you can connect it throughout Google Workspace. So it's going to be able to reference your Gmails, all of your workspace files. Calendar and chat aren't there yet. They will absolutely get there. So I'm going to put that same prompt in here. And then when I hit that plus sign, I can go straight into my drive and pull the files that I want to reference, right? And so this is where I want to grab my, I'm going to grab my project charter and my measures, and I'm going to add those as a knowledge base so that the content of that is part of what it's going to build out. And so same prompt, I'm adding those documents. I'm going to stay on fast, and I am just going to generate. And now I have a different use case in a different value proposition. As much as they tout Gemini for project management, it's actually not useful for project management in that I can't do all of the things I want to be able to do from a central place. But in terms of having a single source of truth for your project, it is almost unmatched. So you see how quickly it's going to spin out, my charter, my scope, a wonderful timeline. So this incredibly quickly and more complex than what I might be able to do, as you saw, if I put that same prompt into Sheets. It's also providing those sources for me as a reference. And then here's where, for me, the project management piece falls a bit apart. I can do this, but if I want to then turn these into something, I could share it, with other users in my organization. But otherwise, I'm going to now export this individually, export each of these into Sheets. And that is where I'm not necessarily in love with this as my tool. So I can use Gemini, and I could just go individually. I can't select the sheet as I go, but I could keep copying these into Sheets. Some of these aren't tabular. So in terms of, if it's just kind of a party of one and you're managing this, this is wonderful in that it's a long, contextual, wonderful conversation. So after I do this, I might say, identify the key stakeholders I need to involve in this project at my corporation. And even when you know the answer, I love asking AI the question, because it's going to tell me people I may not have thought about. So, but here it's telling me I need to take a look at, obviously, I'm project lead, who's my legal or my policy liaison, who's my security and sometimes separate IT liaison, content creators, change management comms, right? And then going after, remember I said who's paying for it? Who is that executive sponsor? Who are my department leads? And then those users, the end users. And it's already going to tell you, hey, do you want me to, draft your roles and responsibilities? What I would love is, please draft an email to introduce my executive sponsor to the project. So now, because its integration is so fantastic, you're going to be able to manage this project completely inside of Gemini. And the issue for me is that it is using Gemini as the source of truth, and then I still have to open a bunch of tabs to get to the applications. But I can absolutely, from Gemini, click create a Gmail, and then be able to judge that and press send. So that is a really great, wonderful kind of sneak peek use of this. And then you just kind of go through this and you set this up. So that is Google Gemini. I think this next system, we're almost done, that I want to show you is taking all of the best use cases of Google Gemini and just turning them into something spectacular. So I'm going to now switch us to, Paul, unless there are any thoughts or questions, to Notebook LM Plus. I am guessing because you are Workspace admins, a lot of you have had exposure to Notebook LM Plus. It is an absolutely extraordinary product. So Notebook LM Plus is like an exploded version of Gemini's project management tool. So I'm going to open Google Notebook LM, and I am going to create a notebook. And the way I create the notebook, and I'm just going to show you one I've already created, because as you're seeing, I'm not going to always get consistent and predictable. And then I'll show you the wonderful kind of weird slide deck that I presented. So I've uploaded, a lot of different resources into the notebook. So I'm going to come back into this notebook, and I can take a bunch of links that I've gathered from around the web, from all those open tabs, everyone, as you're doing research on policy and best practices. And I'm just going to create a new notebook. And I'm going to enter websites, insert, and then I'm going to go ahead and add my Drive file with my policy information, I think. And now you can continue to push as much accessible data. If it's behind a gated wall, it's going to tell you either the URL is invalid, or it's behind a wall and we're not allowed to use that. So I've put in project management tips and AI risk management frameworks, and then I'm going to go right back, everyone, to that sample prompt. And based on these 35 sources, I'm going to generate that response. So this response will be equally robust, right? The Gemini response was wonderfully robust. And because I can continue to engage in that space, it will continue to grow as a source of truth. So it's going to complete this in a bit of time, and I can continue to add sources to Notebook LM Plus. So if you're creating FAQs, this is almost unmatched. It's giving me that project charter, the scope, the timeline. And once it's done, unlike Gemini, it's going to give me the entire answer and allow me to move that entire answer into a note. And I'm going to tell you why you want to move useful answers into note. When you share your notebook with another user, they don't see your chat history. They don't see your chat history and responses. So it's actually this section over here, the right side, the studio, that is the power section of Notebook LM Plus. And so now if you need them to be able to see your answers, they can click in the studio and read that note. And you can also turn that note into a source. So the timeline and the project charter now have been completely added so that you would be able to reference that in future queries. So it's a beautiful self-referencing tool. And then finally, where Notebook LM Plus really sets itself apart is in the measurable and meaningful delivery. You can see, just as with Gemini, this isn't the greatest project management platform. It's incredible for building those first assets. absolutely unbelievable for building the first assets. And of course, for all of the stakeholders, as you're querying and doing work, it's a really great toolkit. What is incredible for this is in the delivery to your end users, because if your final FAQs are in a Notebook LM Plus solution, then end users can come in and experience an audio overview, which is a literal 2-person podcast explaining things that they can interactively question and query, turn it into slide decks, get a video overview. This is quite new. I think this was last month, mind maps and more. So this is an incredible delivery solution for your FAQs, though in terms of all of the practices of project management, not necessarily the strongest, because I can't communicate and assign things and update things. So I love Notebook LM Plus in Gemini, but for project management, this is one of the great delivery platforms, because you can, as I say, Dr. Seuss it. You can eat it with a, fox, standing on a box. It's just an incredible way to manipulate your data into a range of different outputs. So I want to come back here to give you an example of that slide deck that I was telling you about. So let me reopen that. The slide decks are actually quite beautiful and then a little eerie. So stand by, and I'm going to open this one. And then this was, they titled it From Chaos to Command Center. So it takes a few minutes, but you see, that's me. But you see that it can create something quite complex, visualize something quite complex. So that is Notebook LM Plus, one of my absolute favorites. And as you guys have seen, we've been doing all of this. I've done all of this on a Corgi board, which itself is a project management tool for Google Workspace. And all of your tools are built in here. You can chat and have conversations from here. You can query the board with AI, just like you can with Notebook LM Plus. But the reason that we're using it today is that you can export the final product into a deliverable. And we're going to turn this into a Google Doc, which I will then share with Paul and Molly to disseminate with you. So this is a nice overview of Google Workspace, integrations with Gemini. And with that, I will stop sharing and turn my camera back on, and we'll do any final thoughts or questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, DMA. Does anybody have any questions at all?
I know that was a lot of information.
No, there's plenty of information. I know that I'll be watching the video again, trying to get through. Cam?
I just wanted to say thank you and give a small security thing. You touched on it when you were using Notebook LM Pro. If you do give people access to the chat, you can consider that they would be able to get access to all the sources, even if they only can ask questions. So I get asked a lot from people about where Gemini might leak data, and Notebook LM, if you share it with people, is one of the big ones.
Oh, you know what? And Nazir brought something up that, thank you, Kevin, that goes along with this. When you are using Notebook LM inside of your organization, it does gate it to inside of the organization. It can't be shared outside of the organization. If you are using a personal one, if you want to make anyone with a link can access it, Notebook, you have to use a personal account. And for all use of AI, we cannot trust that anything that we're entering is secure. It's all still so new. So I just wanted to share that as well. Thank you, Kevin. Any other thoughts or questions? I know that was a bit of a fire hose to drink from, but my goal was to give you a framework for project management execution, so that as you're looking at the different tools and the way you could use Gemini inside of it, you have something to assess it again. Otherwise, you're looking at a list of endless possibilities. I want to give you context for, but will it help me create an AI FAQ or policy library for my end users? So I hope that was helpful.
Gerard, you got a quick question?
Yeah, thank you. Just amazing stuff. Thank you for sharing. I'm wondering, ultimately, I feel like the promise of this AI stuff in a lot of cases is, it kind of helping to do the work, not for us, but proactively without us asking necessarily. And I'm wondering if you've seen any strategies using any kind of scheduled tasks or anything like that with Gemini to help, with project timeline, which ultimately is a huge challenge and component of actually getting the project done.
I have. And this, if we had more time, is definitely Stefan's wheelhouse, because now as we're moving into agentic AI, which is so incredibly advanced already, certainly inside of Google, all of it is possible and quite easily programmed. I myself just am not confident in autonomous agentic AI. So if I'm saying I'm going to let you look through my emails, look through my documents, send information on my behalf, even within the Google Workspace, I'm not saying I'm going to go build my own custom, autonomous agents, but certainly within Google Workspace, I'm still not comfortable allowing it to act on my behalf. So it's already doable to say, every time I get an email from this person, schedule, send them 3 possible calendar appointments using, Google Scheduler. I could do that right now. I just would not do it. I don't feel comfortable with the autonomy yet. Jared, is that answering your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you so much.
Excellent. So,
oh, sorry.
Sorry, go on. Go.
And Nasir, you can use gems personally for pay. They're built into Workspace. I'm not sure for enterprise. You know what? That's outside of scope for me. But if someone is already, thank you. Yeah, to my knowledge, if you are using it on your enterprise account, it's free. Back to you, Paul.
Yeah. So it's the top of the hour. So if we do have any quick questions, then we can answer them. But otherwise, again, DMA came to us as a member of the community. And offered to present to us all, and that's really what this community is all about. It's all about you guys coming forward and sharing some great insights into what you're doing with Google Workspace, how you're administering it, how you're managing your particular projects inside Workspace. If you have any ideas, any thoughts, if you'd like to step forward, please get in contact with myself or with Molly. We'll then arrange a session with you to help you present to the rest of the community.